From the ankle question that broke a myth, to the corset lie that everyone still repeats, to the law that said a married woman didn't legally exist, to the 108-year-old who lived through all of it and got it on tape. In this video, we're covering all of it. Here's the strange thing about Victorian women. Almost every image you have of them, the corsets, the fainting, the endless rules about what a lady could and couldn't do, was written down by someone who was never one. Men, mostly, cartoonists, novelists, people looking in from the outside. And then, in 1977, a television crew in London sat down across from a woman who was actually there. Her name was Florence Pannell. She was 108 years old. She was born in 1868, and what she describes doesn't quite match the story we've been telling. Florence Ada Pannell was born in Kensington in 1868. That's the year before the Suez Canal opened. And she wasn't a family legend or an internet story. Her age was later verified by the Gerontology Research Group. That 1977 interview on a Thames television program called Money Go Round is the only public appearance she ever recorded. One tape. That's all we get. So it matters what the interviewer, Joan Shenton, chose to ask her first, and she went straight for the ankles, because that's the Victorian woman we think we know. So repressed she couldn't show an ankle, so prudish she put little skirts on the legs of her piano. You've heard that one. Victorians covering up furniture because bare legs were indecent. It's a great story. It's also, as far as anyone can trace it, a joke. The line comes from a travel book published in 1839 by a man called Frederick Marryat, and he was making fun of American prudishness, not reporting on Britain. The historian Matthew Sweet makes the harder point in his book, Inventing the Victorians. The buttoned-up, blushing Victorian is mostly an invention of the people who came afterwards. Every generation needs its parents to look ridiculous. And the rules that did exist? Those were about class. You could only obey them if you could afford to. Then there's the corset, the 16-inch waist, the woman who supposedly had her ribs surgically removed to fit into her dress. Valerie Steele went looking for that evidence. The surgeons, the records, a single documented case. She found none, which makes sense, because this is an era where elective surgery could quite easily kill you. Most lacing pulled the waist in by an inch or two, and working women wore stays for support, the way a weightlifter wears a belt, because they spent all day lifting things. The corset wasn't the cage was written into the law. Here's what a Victorian woman actually was, legally. Under a doctrine called Coverture, the moment she married, she and her husband became one person in the eyes of the law. And that person was him. Her wages were his. Her property was his. Anything she inherited was his. If she walked out, the children were his. A man could divorce his wife for adultery. That was enough. A woman had to prove adultery, and cruelty, or desertion, or bigamy. Adultery on its own didn't count. It took the Married Women's Property Acts of 1870 and 1882 before a wife could fully own her own earnings in her own name. Florence Pannell was born in 1868, 2 years before the first one. And while the law was doing that to them, what were Victorian women actually doing all day? Not fainting, working. The single biggest employer of women in Britain wasn't a mill or a factory. It was other people's houses. Over 1 million women in domestic service. And in 1888, the women and girls making matches at the Bryant and May factory in London were dipping sticks into white phosphorus, which rots the jawbone out of your face. They called it Fossy Jaw. So they walked out. Annie Besant printed what was being done to them, and they won. Teenagers. No vote, no money, no power at all. And they beat the factory. Which brings us back to a young woman in London who did something almost no Victorian woman ever got to do. Florence built a business, her own, beauty care. She worked for years in Paris and in London. She married in 1898. By 1905, her husband was dead, 38 years old, and she had a child to raise alone. She kept going, and in 1971, at 102, she was reported as the oldest voter in the Kensington and Chelsea elections. A woman born decades before women could vote, standing in a polling booth. People love to say the Victorians all died at 40. That's an average, and it's dragged down by babies dying. Survived childhood, and you could easily see your 70s. Florence lived to 111. At the end of the interview, Joan Shenton asked her the obvious question. In 108 years, what is the biggest change you've seen? And Florence Pannell, born by candlelight in 1868, sitting in front of a color television camera, gave a one-word answer: everything. If you want to know what else we've been getting wrong about the people who came before us, there's another one waiting for you right here. Subscribe. We'll keep digging.